The Judicial Conduct Tribunal to conduct hearings on the complaints lodged by civil society organization #HARSHTAG Unite Behind against Judge Nana Makhubele resumed today in Johannesburg. Makhubele is facing allegations of being the chairperson of the board of state-owned rail agency PRASA while also working as a judge. Alison Tilley of Judges Matter joins us tonight. Good evening, Alison. Thank you so much for your time. So before we get into the Judge Makhubele matter, I just want us to talk about what we have been seeing. And it's somewhat of an ongoing conversation, right, Alison? Because on the one hand, it seems to come up every time that we have a member of the judiciary speaking up, weighing in on matters that affect the public. And this time is no different. What do you make of the way in which judges have been speaking? It's difficult to make it so broad, but have been speaking and weighing in on matters of national importance, whether it's corruption, whether it's issues such as the Marikana massacre. Are we really getting close to perhaps finding ourselves in choppy waters when it comes to the conduct of the judiciary?
Well, I think we're certainly in choppy waters as a country, and I think it's particularly important seeing that to make sure that everybody sticks to the job that they know and steer the ship that they're in charge of. And I think we've just heard the Chief Justice giving some views on matters that may come before his court. And I think that is, as an example of what you're talking about, exactly the problem, is that you really don't want to be in a situation where a judge who may hear a matter is then going to have to recuse themselves because they've already expressed an opinion on it. And that's the most basic reason why we don't want judges speaking inappropriately. And I mean, the Code of Conduct makes it absolutely clear that judges, are entitled to speak, and particularly, legal issues, academic issues, give lectures. So that's not in question. But where we have, particularly somebody in the apex court, expressing themselves about issues that will come to the court, I think it really is dangerous territory.
Let's talk about what you've mentioned about the fact that the country finds itself in choppy waters. We have very big challenges administratively, and often matters that end up with the judiciary are matters that in an ideal world could have been resolved without the judiciary, but that is not the case. Does this not create the perfect storm? If we take a look at, let's say, what was said last week by the Chief Justice Raymond Zondo on issues of corruption in this country and how corruption was allowed to prevail, within the so-called 9 wasted years. Is that not also contributing to this challenge that we have?
Look, I think there's no question that, in my mind at least, that judges should judge. Parliament needs to deal with legislation and oversight, and the executive has to govern. And I think that's what's envisaged by the Constitution. And where I think there are questions over how people are doing things, it's very tempting to run to the other branch of government and complain. And certainly in the case of the judiciary, that's exactly what it's there for, is to resolve conflicts around Parliament, legislation, whether or not the executive is functioning in a way that makes sense and is responsible and all of those things. So, there is a role for each of those parts of government to play, but judges judge. That's what they do, and it is frustrating, and I quite understand it. They say the judges have no purse and no sword, by which they mean they don't have the budget of government, and they don't have the implementing arm of the administration. So it's a difficult position to be in, but unfortunately fortunately, actually, in fact, it's the way that they are structured in order to be somebody who's an arbiter of last resort, who can come in and make a judgment and is seen as independent and is accepted as independent by all parties, and their judgments adhered to.
Let's talk about the matter that is taking place, the inquiry that kicked off today, really, against Judge Makhubele and this conflicting role. I know that part of the reason why this inquiry has been set up is to really get to the bottom of how the situation was allowed to happen in the first place. But what does the law say about it?
Well, in her situation, I assume the question is, what does the law say about the Makhubele tribunal? And well, I think there's a couple of things the law says, and there are a couple of things the facts are supposed to say. And one of the things that the tribunal needs to do is get the facts on the matter. The legal question is, I think, will come down to is when does a judge become a judge? Is it when you're interviewed by the JSC? Is it when the JSC recommends you? Or is it when the president signs off on you coming in to your office as a judge? Is it when you get put on payroll by HR? I mean, these are questions nobody's ever really had to answer before. And that's one of the issues that the tribunal will get into. The reason it's so concerned about these issues is that there are serious allegations that there was certainly unethical practice that might rise to more than that on the part of Judge Makhubele when she was a judge. And the question is, if she was a judge, then she is going to have to be held to account, as judges are in the code of conduct and in front of the various committees and tribunals that have been set up to deal with judicial misconduct.
Let's talk about the kind of clarity that you believe this process is going to provide, especially around this question of when a judge becomes a judge, because we know that there are lots of advocates that are occasionally asked to come and act, at the court, and what position then does that render them in? Because they also sit on numerous boards that have various interests. So the implications, if I'm hearing you clearly, could be further reaching than just for Judge Makhubele.
Yes, and I think it's one of the questions that we have to ask at the moment. An even bigger question is not just acting judges, but what about acting judges that are acting pro bono? Because we don't have enough judges, so we're having to ask people to act as judges for no pay. Normally acting judges get paid, but we're in a situation where we only have 250 judges. And we have a lot more people than we used to. The number of judges doesn't change. So I think we've got a serious problem facing us, which is even beyond the question of how to deal with the governance of acting judges, which, as you absolutely say, is a real problem.
All right. Alison Tilley, will leave it there for tonight. And, of course, that particular tribunal has been postponed to January.